The sheriff bought a wife at auction by dawn. She was holding his badge. The auction of souls. The merciless New Mexico sun hammered down on Red Hollow like a blacksmith's forge, turning the dusty main street into a corridor of shimmering heat. Sheriff Jesse Callahan stood in the shadow of Murphy's General Store, his weathered Stetson pulled low, watching the crowd gather in the town square with the grim fascination of vultures circling a dying animal. Jesse had been sheriff of Red Hollow for 10 years, and in that time, he'd seen men do terrible things to each other. Knife fights over card games, shootouts over stolen cattle, and feuds that lasted generations. But nothing turned his stomach quite like the debt auctions held by Judge Harlan McBride. The judge himself stood on a hastily constructed platform, his corpulent frame stuffed into a black suit that had seen better days. Sweat rolled down his jowls as he banged a gavel against a wooden crate, calling for order. The crowd, maybe 40 men, ranging from ranch hands to traveling merchants, pressed closer, their faces showing a mix of curiosity and something darker. "Gentlemen of Red Hollow," McBride began, his voice carrying the oily smoothness of a practiced charlatan, "we gather today in the pursuit of justice. Our fair town operates on the principle of paying all debts." Jesse's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. He tried to stop these auctions before, but McBride had connections all the way to Santa Fe, and without concrete proof of illegality, Jesse's hands were tied by the very law he'd sworn to uphold. The side door of the courthouse opened, and Deputy Marcus Webb, one of McBride's creatures, emerged, roughly pulling a young woman by a chain attached to iron shackles. The crowd's murmur grew louder, hungrier. She stumbled on the wooden steps, nearly falling, but somehow maintained her balance. Her dress, once white, was now the color of desert dust, torn at the hem and stained with what looked like dried blood. Long, dark hair, tangled and unwashed, hung like a curtain around her face, but when she raised her head, Jesse felt something twist in his chest. Her eyes were the color of sage after rain, greenish-gray and haunted, but not broken. Not yet. She couldn't have been older than 23, with the kind of delicate features that spoke of education and breeding, now marred by a purple bruise spreading across her left cheekbone. "Lena Moreau," McBride announced, consulting a sheaf of papers with theatrical flair. "Daughter of the late Baptiste Moreau, who owed this court the sum of $2,000 at the time of his unfortunate demise. Miss Moreau has been working off this debt for the past 3 months, but progress has been unsatisfactory." Jesse knew Baptiste Moreau by reputation, a French-Canadian trader who'd come to Red Hollow 5 years ago with dreams of opening a freight company. Decent man by all accounts, but with a weakness for McBride's rigged card games at the Silver Dollar Saloon. Therefore, McBride continued, "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I hereby offer Miss Moreau's remaining debt and her person for public auction. She's young, strong, and educated, knows her letters and numbers, and speaks English and French. Experienced in household duties. Well, open bidding at $50. The words hit Jesse like a physical blow. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it stated so baldly, the reduction of a human being to livestock, made his hand instinctively move toward his Colt. $75. The first bid came from Tom Garrett, who ran the Silver Dollar Saloon and the brothel attached to it. He was a mountain of a man with cruel eyes and hands that had left marks on more than one woman in town. $100. This was from a traveling merchant Jesse didn't recognize, a thin man with the calculating look of someone who dealt in human misery. On the platform, Lena Moreau stood perfectly still, but Jesse could see the tremor in her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched and unclenched in their shackles. She was fighting to maintain dignity in the face of complete degradation. $125. Garrett again, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. $150. Another voice, Carlos Mendoza, who ran a ranch 40 miles south, was known for working his help into early graves. Jesse found himself moving forward, pushing through the crowd. He didn't have a plan, hadn't thought this through, but something in him, maybe the memory of his mother's stories, maybe just basic human decency, wouldn't let him stand by and watch. $200, he said, his voice cutting through the crowd's chatter like a knife. Every head turned. The sheriff never participated in these auctions. He kept the peace, broke up fights, and tracked down horse thieves, but he didn't involve himself in McBride's semi-legal slave trade. McBride's piggy eyes narrowed. Well, well, Sheriff Callahan, I didn't know you were in the market for domestic help. Just making a bid, Judge. That's still legal, isn't it? Oh, perfectly legal, McBride smiled, showing too many teeth. Though I wonder what the good people of Red Hollow will think about their upstanding sheriff purchasing a woman. $250. Garrett snarled, glaring at Jesse. Jesse met his gaze steadily. $300. The crowd stirred restlessly. This was becoming expensive, even for a young woman. Most dead auctions ended at under $200. $350. The traveling merchant called out. $400. Jesse's voice remained calm, but inside, he was calculating rapidly. He had $600 saved from 10 years of living simply, planning for a future that seemed increasingly distant. $450. Garrett was red-faced now, furious at being challenged. Jesse looked at Lena Moreau again. She was watching him now, those sage-green eyes wide with something that might have been hope or might have been terror. He thought of his mother, dead these 15 years, who'd told him stories of her own bondage in Georgia before the war. He thought of the badge on his chest and what it was supposed to mean. $500, he said clearly. A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was an astronomical sum, more than most men in Red Hollow saw in 2 years. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, calculating. 500 would cut deep into even his profits. The merchant shook his head, backing away. McBride looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, clearly having expected the girl to go for much less, probably to Garrett, with whom he had arrangements. 500 going once, McBride said reluctantly. Going twice. He paused, hoping for another bid. Sold to Sheriff Callahan. The gavel came down with finality. Jesse climbed the platform steps, very aware of the eyes on him. He pulled the bank draft from his wallet, nearly his entire life savings, and handed it to McBride. The papers, he said quietly. McBride thrust a document at him. She's yours, Sheriff. Lock, stock, and barrel. Try not to wear her out too quickly. Jesse ignored the leer, turning to Lena. Up close, he could see she was trembling, exhaustion, and fear finally overwhelming whatever reserves of strength had kept her upright. Can you walk? He asked gently. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Webb removed the shackles. The deputy complied reluctantly, and Jesse saw the raw wounds on her wrists where the iron had rubbed. Without thinking, he shrugged out of his coat and draped it around her shoulders, then offered her his arm. She took it after a moment's hesitation, and he helped her down from the platform. The crowd parted before them, whispers following in their wake like tumbleweeds. My horse is this way, Jesse said quietly. Do you ride? Yes. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over a whisper. He helped her mount Buttercup, his gentle mare, then swung up onto his horse, Cavalry. As they rode out of town, Jesse could feel the weight of eyes on their backs and could imagine the stories already spreading. The upright sheriff who'd bought himself a woman. By nightfall, there'd be a dozen versions, each more sordid than the last. However, he would deal with that problem tomorrow. Right now, he had a traumatized woman who probably expected the worst from him, and somehow he had to convince her that not all men were monsters. The 3-mile ride to his cabin passed in silence, except for the steady clop of hooves and the distant cry of a hawk. The landscape shifted from the dusty sprawl of Red Hollow to the greener country near Willow Creek, where cottonwoods provided shade and the water ran clear. His cabin came into view, a modest 2-room structure he'd built himself 5 years ago, when it became clear that keeping the peace in Red Hollow was going to be a long-term job. It wasn't much, but it was solid, with a good roof and a small stable for the horses. As they dismounted, Lena finally spoke. Why? Jesse removed his hat, running a hand through hair that had gone silver early. Too many worries, his mother would have said. Why what? Why did you buy me? What do you want? He could hear the fear beneath the flat tone, the resignation of someone who'd learned to expect the worst. I want to unsaddle these horses and get them some water, he said. Then I figure we could both use some food. After that, "You're welcome to the bed in the back room. I'll bunk out here by the fire." She stared at him, searching his face for the lie, the trap. Men don't pay $500 for nothing. Maybe they should. He led the horses to the stable, giving her time to process. When he returned, she was standing exactly where he'd left her, as if movement might trigger some hidden violence. "Come inside," he said. "Please. You're about to fall over." The cabin's interior was sparse, but clean. A main room with a fireplace, table and chairs, and a smaller bedroom through a doorway covered by a blanket. Jesse went to the kitchen area and began pulling out supplies. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Before you collapse." She sat gingerly, watching him with those haunted eyes as he put beans on to heat and slice cornbread. "How long have you been with McBride?" he asked, keeping his tone conversational. 3 months. "Since my father." She stopped, swallowed. "He died in March." Hart gave out at the card table. McBride said he owed $2,000. Said I could work it off. "What kind of work?" Jesse kept his voice carefully neutral, though he could guess. "Cleaning. Cooking. Serving drinks at the Silver Dollar." She paused. Garrett wanted more. McBride kept putting him off, saying I was worth more intact. I think he was waiting for a better offer. Jesse set a plate in front of her with beans, cornbread, and some preserved peaches he'd been saving. "Eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks." She picked up the spoon with shaking hands, then seemed to remember hunger, and ate with quiet desperation. Jesse poured coffee, strong and black, and sat across from her. "Your father was Baptiste Moreau? Ran freight?" She nodded. "He was a good man. Just weak when it came to cards. He thought he could win enough to expand the business and bring my mother out from St. Louis." Tears gathered in her eyes, but didn't fall. "She doesn't even know he's dead. I couldn't send word." "We'll send a letter tomorrow," Jesse said. "Let her know you're safe." "Am I?" The question hung between them like smoke. Jesse reached for his badge, unpinned it from his shirt, and set it on the table between them. "You know what this is?" "A sheriff's badge. It's supposed to mean something. Protection. Justice. Law." He pushed it across to her. "You hold on to it tonight. In the morning, if you don't feel safe, if you think I'm not the man this badge says I should be, you give it back, and I'll take you wherever you want to go. Train fare, stage fare, whatever you need." She stared at the badge, then at him. "And if I want to stay?" "Then you stay. As a guest, not property. That paper McBride gave me? First thing tomorrow, we burn it. You're free, Miss Moreau. The only choice now is what you do with that freedom." Something shifted in her face, not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of it. She picked up the badge, running her thumb over the worn metal. "My mother's name was Amelie," she said quietly. "She taught me to read with Victor Hugo and the Bible. He said education was the only thing no one could take from you." A bitter smile. "She was wrong about that." "No," Jesse said firmly. "She wasn't. McBride could chain your body, but your mind and your education are still yours. Always will be." They finished the meal in companionable silence. As darkness fell, Jesse showed her to the bedroom, his bedroom, with its simple bed and washstand. "There's water in the pitcher," he said, "and a clean nightshirt in the drawer if you need it. The door locks from the inside." She stood in the doorway, still clutching his badge. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Jesse considered lying, giving her some easy answer. But she deserved truth. "My mother was born into slavery in Georgia. When the war ended, she was 15, alone, and traumatized. A Union officer found her hiding in a burned-out barn. Could have done anything he wanted. Instead, he took her to a freedmen's camp and made sure she was safe. He even gave her money to start a new life. He met her eyes. She named me after him. Jesse Campbell. I've never met the man, but I've tried to live up to his example." "And have you?" "Not always. But I'm trying tonight." She nodded slowly, then stepped into the bedroom. Just before she closed the door, she looked back. "Thank you, Jesse. I mean that." "Lock the door," he said gently. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day." He heard the lock click and allowed himself a small smile. Trust would take time, but it was a start. Jesse made up his bedroll by the fire, his Colt within easy reach out of habit. Outside, coyotes sang to the rising moon, and the creek whispered its endless story. He thought about the $500, his entire future, spent in 5 minutes. He contemplated the rumors that would spread swiftly throughout Red Hollow. He concluded that it was worth it. Some things mattered more than money or reputation. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought he heard movement in the bedroom. Lena was exploring her temporary sanctuary, perhaps looking out the window at the stars. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions, and probably trouble for McBride and Garrett. But tonight, one woman was safe who hadn't been that morning. It was enough. It was a start. Dawn's promise. Jesse woke to 2 unfamiliar sensations. The rich aroma of real coffee, not the bitter trail brew he usually made, and the soft sound of humming. For a moment, he lay still on his bedroll, disoriented. Golden dawn light filtered through the windows, painting familiar walls in unfamiliar ways. Then memory returned to the auction. Lena Moreau, $500 that represented a decade of planning vanished in an afternoon's impulsive decision. He slowly arose from his bed, adjusting to the discomfort of spending the night on the floor. Through the kitchen window, he could see Lena at the well, drawing water. She still wore his coat over her torn dress, but she'd washed her face and pulled her dark hair back into a neat braid. In the morning light, despite the bruise on her cheek and the hollows under her eyes, he could see the woman she'd been before McBride got his hooks into her. She turned, saw him watching, and stiffened. Then, deliberately, she relaxed and continued her task. Jesse contemplated her progress. By the time she returned with the water, he'd folded his bedroll and straightened his clothes. She moved around his kitchen with surprising familiarity, finding things he'd forgotten he owned. "There was bacon in your cold box," she said without preamble. "And eggs. When did you last cook a real breakfast?" Jesse tried to remember. "I can't say that I recall. That's what I thought." She cracked eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. "He subsists solely on coffee and jerky. No wonder you're as thin as a fence rail." It was surreal, watching her move through his space with such purpose. She seemed to belong there. Like this was normal. A woman making breakfast while wearing a coat that hung to her knees, his sheriff's badge sitting on the table between them like a silent witness. "You don't have to do this," he said. You're not. I know what I'm not." She flipped the eggs with a sharp motion. "But I've been trapped in that courthouse room for 3 months with nothing to do but think. I need to be useful. I need to." She paused, searching for words. "I need to remember who I was before." Jesse understood that. After the war, after watching his mother fade away from grief, he'd needed the badge to remember who he was supposed to be. She set a plate in front of him with eggs, bacon, and toasted bread with butter he didn't remember buying. It was the best meal he'd had in months. "Eat," she commanded, then sat across from him with her plate. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Lena reached for his badge, turning it over in her hands. "I thought about running in the night," she said quietly, "taking one of your horses and just going. Why didn't you? Where would I go? I have no money, no family, except my mother in St. Louis, and she's barely surviving herself. McBride has connections everywhere." And she met his eyes. "You trusted me. No one's done that in a long time. Trust has to start somewhere." She set the badge down carefully. "I don't know who you are, Jesse Callahan. Not really. But if you ever stop being this kind of man, I'll give it back." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. She was offering him accountability, making herself the guardian of his better nature. It was a responsibility he hadn't expected and wasn't sure he deserved. "Then I guess you'd better keep it close," he said. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, hinting at the woman hidden beneath months of fear and degradation. After breakfast, Jesse retrieved the bill of sale McBride had given him. He held it up so Lena could see, then walked to the fireplace. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "I burn this. You're not legally mine anymore." Just a guest who needs a place to stay while she figures out her next move. Burn it. Her voice was fierce. Burn it and let me watch it turn to ash. He tossed the paper into the flames. They stood together, watching it curl and blacken, watching her chains become smoke. There, Jesse said. Free woman. The question now is what you want to do with that freedom. Lena wrapped his coat tighter around herself. I need clothes that fit. I need time to remember how to be a person instead of property. We'll go to Murphy's store later. Get yourself proper clothes. As for time, you've got as much as you need. I'll work for my keep. Cooking, cleaning, mending. I'm good with numbers too, and help my father with the freight business accounts. All right. But you work as a free woman, not a servant. And any time you want to leave, you just say the word. She nodded, then looked around the sparse cabin. You need curtains. And more than 2 plates. And something on these walls besides bare wood. Never saw the point of living alone. You're not alone now. The words seemed to surprise her as much as him. I meanwhile am here. Temporary. Temporary, he agreed, though something in him protested the word. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Jesse's hand went automatically to his gun, then relaxed. Outlaws didn't knock. Sheriff Callahan? A familiar voice, Sam Murphy, from the general store. Got a telegram for you. Marked urgent. Jesse opened the door to find not just Murphy, but half a dozen townspeople, trying to look like they weren't desperately curious about the woman in his cabin. Sam. Jesse took the telegram. Folks. Morning, Sheriff. Murphy peered past him, caught a glimpse of Lena, and his eyes widened. We heard. That is, there's talk. I'm sure there is. Jesse unfolded the telegram, scanned it, and felt his jaw tighten. Thank you for bringing this out. Is everything all right? This is from Mrs. Hutchins, the minister's wife, her tone suggesting she thought nothing about this situation could possibly be all right. Fine, ma'am. If you'll excuse me, I have official business to attend to. He closed the door on their curious faces, knowing the gossip would be all over town within the hour. What is it? Lena asked. Jesse handed her the telegram. The McBrides filed a complaint with the territorial governor. Says I abused my position to interfere with legal commerce. She read it, her face paling. He's trying to invalidate the sale. He's trying. Won't succeed. The sale was legal, witnessed, and documented. But he'll make trouble. Jesse pinned on his badge. I need to go to town and deal with this. Will you be all right here alone? Fear flickered in her eyes. What if they come while you're gone? Garrett or McBride's men? Jesse opened a drawer and pulled out a Remington .32. You know how to use this? My father taught me. Then you're safer than most. But I don't think they'll try anything in daylight. They're cowards who prefer darkness for their dirty work. She took the gun and checked the cylinder with practiced ease. How long will you be gone? At most, it will be a few hours. Lock the door behind me. Anyone who tries to force their way in, you shoot first and ask questions later. I'll handle the consequences. Jesse. She caught his sleeve as he turned to go. Be careful. McBride's dangerous when cornered. So am I. The ride to town gave Jesse time to think, to plan. McBride had overplayed his hand with that telegram. Official complaints meant official scrutiny, and Jesse had been carefully documenting the judge's corruption for 2 years. Maybe it was time to use that ammunition. Red Hollow's Main Street was busier than usual for a Saturday morning. Word had spread about the auction, about the sheriff's purchase, and everyone wanted to catch a glimpse of him, to gauge his reaction to their whispers and stares. Jesse tied cavalry outside the sheriff's office and found Deputy Pete Hawkins, one of the few honest lawmen in town, waiting with coffee and a grim expression. Pete said, I assumed you'd be interested. McBride's been raising hell since dawn. Says you exceeded your authority. Did I? Jesse hung his hat on the peg and settled behind his desk. Could you please point out the law that states a sheriff is not allowed to bid at a legal auction? Can't. Because there isn't one. Pete leaned against the wall. But that won't stop him from making your life miserable. Or hers. He can try. Jesse, what the hell were you thinking? Are you really willing to spend $500 on a woman you've never met? Jesse pulled out a key and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. I was thinking about this. He placed a thick leather journal on the desk. 2 years of documentation. Every rigged auction, every forged document, every bribe. Names, dates, amounts. Pete whistled low. That's enough to hang him, figuratively speaking, or literally, depending on what a federal judge thinks about human trafficking. Jesse turned pages, showing column after column of careful notes. The problem was always getting someone to testify. Everyone's too scared or too complicit. And now I have a witness who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain from seeing McBride brought down. The woman, Lena. She's been in that courthouse for 3 months, Pete. Seen every dirty deal, heard every whispered conversation. McBride thought she was furniture, beneath notice. His mistake. Pete shook his head. It's dangerous. For both of you. Everything in this job is dangerous. Jesse closed the journal. But some things are worth the risk. Like a pretty woman with green eyes? Like justice. The safety of the woman is merely a collateral benefit. Pete's knowing smile suggested he wasn't buying it, but before he could respond, the door burst open. Tom Garrett filled the frame, face flushed with anger and whiskey despite the early hour. Callahan. He stomped forward, trailing mud and the stink of the saloon. You've got something that belongs to me. Jesse remained seated, hands flat on the desk. I don't recall taking anything of yours, Garrett. That woman. I had a deal with McBride. She was supposed to be mine. Then you should have bid higher. Garrett's hand dropped to his gun. Maybe I'll just take her. What's to stop me? I am. Jesse's voice was quiet, dangerous. And the law. The law. Garrett spat. McBride is the law in this town. No. He's a judge. I'm the law. Jesse stood slowly, hand near, but not on his weapon. And the law says Lena Moreau is a free woman. You touch her, you'll hang for it. Are you threatening me, Sheriff? Stating facts. You're drunk, Garrett. Go sleep it off before you do something stupid. This isn't over. Garrett backed toward the door, nearly stumbling. McBride's got plans for you. And when you're out of the way, that pretty little thing will end up right where she belongs, in my establishment. After he left, Pete looked at Jesse. He means it. They'll come for her. I know. Jesse strapped on his gun belt and checked his ammunition. That's why I'm not leaving her alone again. What about the town? Your duties? You can handle things for a few days. I'm taking some of that vacation time I've never used. To do what? To make sure a free woman stays free. And maybe to bring down a corrupt judge while I'm at it. Jesse made 3 more stops before heading home. First, the telegraph office, where he sent a carefully worded message to a federal marshal he'd worked with before. Second, Murphy's store, where he bought clothes, toiletries, and enough supplies to last a week without coming to town. The speculation in Murphy's eyes was almost comical, but Jesse offered no explanations. His final stop was the church. Reverend Hutchins was tending the small cemetery, his thin frame bent over a freshly planted rosebush. Sheriff, he straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. I heard about yesterday's incident. I'm sure you did. Jesse studied the older man. Hutchins was one of the few in Red Hollow who'd never been corrupted by McBride's money. I need to ask you something, Reverend. Off the record. Of course. If someone wanted to send a letter to St. Louis, to a woman named Amelie Moreau, how would they go about it without McBride knowing? Hutchins's eyes sharpened. The young woman's mother? She deserves to know her daughter's safe. Indeed, she does. The Reverend glanced around, then lowered his voice. My wife's sister lives in Santa Fe. She forwards correspondence for people who need discretion. I could arrange it. I'd be obliged. Sheriff. Hutchins caught his arm as he turned to leave. What you did yesterday, some are calling it scandalous. Others, he smiled. Others are calling it the most Christian act they've seen in Red Hollow in years. I just did what seemed right. Sometimes that's the hardest thing in the world. The ride home seemed longer, Jesse's mind churning with plans and contingencies. He'd lit a fuse yesterday at that auction, and the explosion was coming. The question was whether he could control it, directing it toward McBride instead of Lena. As his cabin came into view, he saw smoke rising from the chimney and saw Lena's silhouette in the window. She was watching for him, the Remington probably close at hand. The sight did something to his chest, a tightening that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the realization that someone was waiting for him to come home. She opened the door before he could knock, relief clear on her face. You were gone longer than a few hours. Had errands. He carried in the packages from Murphy's. Got you some proper clothes. Had to guess at the sizes. Her eyes widened at the bounty. 2 dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, and soap that smelled like lavender instead of lye. This must have cost. Money's just paper if it's not used for something worthwhile. He set down the last package. There's trouble coming, Lena. McBride and Garrett aren't going to let this go. I know. She fingered the fabric of a blue dress, almost reverently. I've been thinking while you were gone. You mentioned your intention to serve as a witness. That's dangerous talk. Everything's dangerous for a woman alone in this world. She met his eyes. But maybe I don't have to be alone. Maybe we could help each other. What are you proposing? You need evidence against McBride. I have 3 months' worth of memories, things I saw and heard. You need someone to testify. I need protection and a chance at a real life. She took a breath. What if I stayed? I'm not who you think I am. But as your partner in bringing him down? Jesse studied her face and saw determination mixing with fear. You understand what you're risking? McBride has reach. Even if we succeed, you'll have made enemies. I made enemies the day I was born female and poor. Her voice turned fierce. At least this way, I'm fighting back. All right. He extended his hand. Partners. She shook it, her grip firmer than he'd expected. Partners. As the sun set over Willow Creek, they sat at his small table, planning. Lena's memory proved remarkably sharp, recalling dates, names, and amounts with the precision of someone trained in bookkeeping. Jesse took notes, cross-referencing with his own observations, building a case that would damn McBride and half his network. There's a safe, Lena said suddenly. The safe was concealed behind a portrait in his office. He thought I was too stupid to notice him opening it. The combination is his birthday backwards. 3181. What's in it? Real ledgers. Not the ones he shows the territorial auditors. And she hesitated. Photographs of important men in compromising positions. That's how he keeps control. Jesse felt a surge of excitement. The moment was more than he'd hoped for. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Yes. No hesitation now. But Jesse, some of those men, they're powerful. The group includes judges, senators, and even a general. If those photos are revealed, then the men in power will also be implicated alongside McBride. Justice is unbiased and impartial. She smiled, that rare expression that transformed her face. You really believe that, don't you? In justice, does the law mean something? I have to. If not, what purpose does it serve? They worked until full dark, when exhaustion finally claimed Lena. She swayed in her chair, fighting sleep. Bed, Jesse ordered. We'll continue tomorrow. But there's more. There's time. McBride remains unmoving, and you find yourself unable to move. She nodded, rising. At the bedroom door, she paused. Jesse, thank you. For everything. But especially for seeing me as a person, not just a problem to be solved or a possession to be claimed. You shouldn't thank me for that. That's just basic human decency. You'd be surprised how rare that is. She held up his badge. I'll keep this safe. After she closed the door, Jesse made his own preparations for the night. He loaded his rifle, checked the windows, and set up a few early warning systems he'd learned during his Army days. If trouble came calling, they'd be ready. But trouble didn't come that night. Instead, Jesse dozed fitfully in his chair by the fire, waking periodically to check the perimeter. Once, near midnight, he heard Lena crying softly in the bedroom, releasing months of fear and tension in the safety of darkness. He wanted to comfort her, but knew she needed privacy more than sympathy. Dawn came with a chorus of birds and the sound of horses approaching. Jesse was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, but relaxed when he recognized Pete Hawkins riding up with another tall, lean man wearing the distinctive black coat of a federal marshal. Jesse stepped onto the porch. "Pete." "Marshal?" "Tom Brennan." The marshal dismounted, keen eyes taking in everything. "Got your telegram, Callahan?" "I came as quick as I could." "Appreciate it. Come inside. There's someone you need to meet and a story you need to hear." Lena emerged from the bedroom, dressed in one of her new dresses, Jesse's badge pinned to her collar like a talisman. She'd washed her hair, and in the morning light, despite the lingering bruise on her face, she looked like a different woman from the broken creature on the auction block. "Miss Moreau," Jesse made the introduction. "This is Marshal Brennan. He's here to help us bring down McBride." She studied the marshal with those sage-green eyes, then nodded. "Then we'd better make coffee. This is going to take a while." As she moved to the kitchen, graceful and purposeful, Jesse caught the marshal's raised eyebrow. "It's not what you think," Jesse said quietly. "What I think," Brennan replied, "is that you've either done the stupidest thing of your career or the most noble. Maybe both." "Maybe both," Jesse agreed, watching Lena work. "But sometimes a man has to choose between what's legal and what's right. Yesterday I chose right. And today? Today we make them the same thing." The sun climbed higher, painting the cabin in shades of gold and possibility. Inside, 3 people bent over documents and testimony, building a case that would shake Red Hollow to its foundations. And in the midst of it all, Lena Moriuno, no longer property, no longer broken, wore a sheriff's badge over her heart and spoke truth to power with a voice that would not be silenced. The revolution had begun with a single bid at an auction. Now it would end with justice, or not at all. The reckoning. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marshal Brennan had set up a temporary headquarters in Jesse's cabin, transforming the simple home into a war room against corruption. Maps of Red Hollow covered one wall, marked with properties McBride owned through shell companies. Stacks of testimony filled the table, not just Lena's account, but statements from others who'd found courage in her example. Word had leaked, as word always did in small towns. Some came under cover of darkness. A Mexican farmer whose land had been seized for fabricated debts, a widow forced to sell her daughter's virtue to keep her son from prison on false charges, and a traveling preacher who'd witnessed McBride's men burn a homestead when the owner refused to sell. Lena sat with each of them, her own story loosening tongues that had been tied by fear. She had a gift for listening, for making broken people feel heard. Jesse watched her work with growing admiration and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. "She's remarkable," Brennan commented on the 3rd evening, as Lena comforted a sobbing woman whose husband had died in McBride's rig mine. "Most people would be too consumed by their own trauma to help others." "She's the strongest person I know," Jesse said simply. "And you're half in love with her already." Jesse didn't deny it. Couldn't really. Not when every small gesture, the way she absently polished his badge each morning, how she hummed French lullabies while cooking, and her fierce protectiveness of the other victims, carved deeper into his heart. "Doesn't matter," he said finally. "She's been through enough without me adding complications." Maybe Brennan allowed. "But I've seen how she looks at you when she thinks you're not watching. Like you're something she didn't believe existed anymore." Before Jesse could respond, Pete Hawkins burst through the door. "They're coming." McBride gathered his men, maybe 20 of them. "They'll be here within the hour." Lena appeared from the bedroom where she'd been helping the widow rest. "How many?" "Too many," Pete admitted. "Garrett's with them, and some hired guns from Texas." "Then we make our stand here," Jesse decided. "Marshal, how many men can you deputize?" "Already done. Got 6 good men hidden in the rocks above the creek, plus Pete here and myself. .8 against 20.9, Lena said quietly. She retrieved the Remington from a drawer and checked the loads that I won't hide while others fight for my freedom. "Lena." "No, Jesse. Her eyes flashed. I've been property, been powerless. Never again. This is my fight too. Do you recognize the steel in her voice? The same determination that had kept her sane through 3 months of hell. All right, but you stay inside and cover the windows. Last resort only. She nodded, then surprised him by stepping close, reaching up to straighten his badge. Remember what I said? Don't stop being the man who'd pay $500 for a stranger's freedom. I'll try. Promise me. Her hand rested over his heart. Whatever happens, don't let them make you like them. Don't let hate win. That I promise. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, soft as butterfly wings, for luck. Then she was gone, taking position at the window with her rifle, leaving Jesse touching his face like a schoolboy. Well, Brennan said dryly, if that doesn't motivate a man to survive, nothing will. They took their positions as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Jesse and Brennan are on the porch, Pete is, covering the stable, and the deputized men are spread through the rocks and trees. The widow and other refugees huddled in the root cellar. Jesse had insisted on that much. The riders came as darkness gathered, torches turning them into demons from a medieval painting that McBride rode in the center, his bulk making his horse labor. Garrett flanked him, and Jesse recognized several others, corrupt deputies, hired killers, men who profited from Red Hollow's misery. They stopped just outside rifle range, McBride riding forward with a white handkerchief tied to his gun barrel. "Parley, Sheriff?" he called, "or have you abandoned all pretense of law?" Jesse stepped off the porch, rifle casual in his hands. "State your business, McBride. Simple. The woman Lena Moreau is escaped property. Return her, and we'll overlook your indiscretion that she's a free woman, bought and paid for, then freed. You have no claim that I have a writ from Judge Patterson in Santa Fe. Says the sale was conducted under duress. Therefore invalid that Patterson's your cousin," Jesse noted. "And that writ isn't worth the paper it's written." On McBride's false friendliness evaporated. "That you've got federal men here. Callahan, that I end my jurisdiction. That's overreach." Actually, Brennan stepped into view. "Investigating human trafficking and judicial corruption is exactly my jurisdiction. That you're under arrest, Harlan McBride. You and every man with you." That McBride laughed, ugly and harsh. ".8 men against 20. You must be touched in the head." "Martial quality over quantity," Brennan said mildly. "And we have the law on our side. That I am the law in Red Hollow." "No," Jesse's voice carried across the gathering darkness. "That you're a parasite who's fed on this town's blood for too long. That it ends tonight. Then you've chosen death." That McBride wheeled his horse around. "Take them. Burn it all. I want the woman alive. The rest can die." The night exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides, muzzle flashes like deadly fireflies. Jesse dropped to one knee, picking targets with the methodical precision of his army days. Beside him, Brennan worked his rifle like a maestro conducting a symphony of justice. The deputies in the rocks opened up, catching McBride's men in a crossfire. Horses screamed, men shouted, and the air filled with gun smoke and desperation. Jesse saw Garrett break from the pack, riding hard for the cabins. Side entrance, Lena. He sprinted after him, knowing he'd never make in time. The Remington barked once, twice. Garrett tumbled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder, cursing. Lena appeared in the doorway, small and fierce. "The gun steady in her hands. That I told you," she said to Garrett's groaning form. "Never again." Jesse reached her as more riders circled the cabin. Inside, they barricaded the door, taking positions at windows. Outside, the battle raged. Pete had turned the stable into a fortress, his shotgun booming. The deputies held the high ground, but McBride's men had numbers and desperation. "They're trying to flank us," Lena observed, tracking movement through her window. Jesse admired her coolness under fire. Most people would be panicking. She was calculating angles and counting ammunition. That a torch arced through the air, trailing sparks. That it hit the roof with a shower of embers. "They're trying to burn us out." Jesse grabbed a bucket of water they'd prepared. "Cover me." He kicked open the door, dousing the flames before they could catch. Bullets whined past his head. But Lena's covering fire was precise, driving back the attackers back inside. He found her reloading with shaking hands. "Are you all right?" "Fine, just it's different when they shoot back." He touched her shoulder. "You're doing great. We're going to get through this. Together, together." The battle turned into siege. That McBride's men surrounded the cabin, pouring fire into the windows. Jesse and Lena moved constantly, shifting positions, making their few defenders seem like many. Then, just as Jesse's ammunition ran low, new gunfire erupted from the east. Riders poured out of the darkness. Townspeople, ranchers, ordinary citizens who'd had enough that it's Reverend Hutchins. Lena exclaimed. And Mrs. Murphy, and is that the schoolteacher? It was. Half of Red Hollow had come, armed with everything from hunting rifles to pitchforks. They hit McBride's men from behind, righteous fury making up for lack of skill. The tide turned in minutes. Hired guns threw down their weapons, preferring arrest to facing an angry mob that McBride himself tried to flee, but didn't get far. Mrs. Hutchins, of all people, knocked him from his horse with an expertly thrown skillet that A.S. Dawn broke over. The battlefield. Marshal Brennan supervised the arrest of 15 men, including a thoroughly deflated Judge McBride. The corrupt judge sat in shackles, the same ones he'd used on Lena, while Brennan read him his rights. Jesse found Lena standing by the creek, washing blood from her hands. Not her own, thankfully. She tended the wounded with the same calm competence she'd shown under fire. It's over, he said quietly to Isset. She didn't look at him. McBride's just one man. There are others like him, other towns like Red Hollow. But now people know they can fight back. You showed them that we showed them. She turned to face him, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. That I was so scared, Jesse. The whole time I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He opened his arms, and she fell into them, trembling. You were magnificent. They stood there as the sun painted the world new, holding each other while the creek sang its eternal song. Finally, Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes. What happens now? Trials. Testimony. Justice. Jesse tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Brennan says it'll take months to sort out all of McBride's crimes. You'll need to testify. And after? After. He struggled for words. I suppose you'll be free to go anywhere. Teaching positions back east, like we talked about. Or St. Louis, to your mother. What if I don't want to go? His heart stuttered. Lena, I know what people will say. The sheriff and his bought woman. But I don't care. She pulled his badge from her pocket, but instead of returning it, she pinned it back on his chest. You're still the same man. The one who sees chains others ignore. The one who believes justice means something. I'm also the man who's fallen in love with you, he admitted. Somewhere between that auction block and this morning, you became everything. Only this morning? She smiled through her tears. I've loved you since you made me breakfast that first day. Since you gave me your bed and your trust, and asked nothing in return. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, tasting hope and gunpowder and forever. Marry me, he said against her lips. Not because you need protection, not for propriety. Because I can't imagine a life without you in it. Yes. No hesitation, no doubt. But Jesse? I'm keeping the badge. Someone needs to make sure you stay the man I fell in love with. Deal. Epilogue 5 years later. The schoolhouse stood where the auction block had once poisoned Red Hollow's heart. Inside, Lena Callahan taught 25 students, using methods that would have scandalized her St. Louis teachers, but produced children who could think as well as read. Jesse arrived as the lunch bell rang, children streaming out with the energy of the young and well-fed. Several called out greetings, Sheriff Callahan, and he responded with mock-serious salutes that made them giggle. Lena met him at the door, one hand resting on her rounded belly, where their second child grew. Their first, a daughter named Amelie, after Lena's mother, clung to her skirts. Papa. 3-year-old Amy launched herself at Jesse, who caught her and swung her high, eliciting squeals of delight. How are my girls? He asked, kissing his wife's cheek. Eager for lunch. Amy helped me teach numbers today. Didn't you, sweet? I counted to 20. Amy announced. In English and French. Brilliant, just like your mother. Jesse set her down. Why don't you run ahead to the cafe? We'll catch up. As Amy scampered off, Jesse and Lena walked slowly, enjoying the bustling peace of Red Hollow's Main Street. Where once corruption had festered, legitimate businesses now thrived. The Silver Dollar Saloon had become a respectable hotel. The courthouse hosted actual trials instead of travesties. Letter from Brennan, Jesse said, pulling it from his pocket. McBride died in prison. Heart gave out. May God have mercy on his soul, Lena said, meaning it. Hate is too heavy to carry, even for him. They'd rebuilt Red Hollow together, stone by stone, law by law. Other towns had followed their example, regular people standing up to corruption, inspired by the story of a sheriff who'd bought a woman's freedom and a woman who'd bought a town soul. Any regrets? Jesse asked, as he did sometimes. Only one. Lena stopped walking and pulled his badge from her apron. She still carried it and still polished it daily. I sometimes wish I could give this back, just to see the look on your face. Why would you give it back? Because you're no longer the man I fell in love with. At his alarmed look, she smiled. You're better, stronger, more compassionate. The man I fell in love with saved one woman. The man you become saves entire communities. Only because I have you watching my back. And I always will. She pinned the badge to his chest, their daily ritual. Partners? Partners. Always. They walked on, hand in hand, toward their daughter and their future. Behind them, the schoolhouse stood as testament to the truth that sometimes love came to auction, paid the price of freedom, and changed the world one heart at a time. In the distance, Willow Creek sang its endless song, and somewhere in Red Hollow, chains were breaking still.